poorest countries in the world.
By the 90s, Tivoli Gardens under Christopher Coke became a sort of criminal republic.
Coke, who goes by the aliases Dudus and President, is one of the world's most dangerous drug lords.
His father's dead. Christopher Coke took over the shower posse.
The posses invaded the United States, bringing with them a sophisticated drug operation.
In the U.S., it was an expanding gang, bringing in tens of millions of dollars.
He was using the Second Jago track team as drug couriers.
Execution-style shootings, the torture cells that he had.
Looks like something out of a movie, doesn't it?
But they loved him because if you weren't getting a job, if you didn't have money, you can go to Christopher Coke and he'd make it happen.
Dudus was the one who said, we need a prime minister to be our man.
When you owe a gang link for your election, you are untouchable.
However, the U.S. government was very insistent.
Today's raids aimed at the heart of the shower posse.
Drones supplied by the United States were flying over Tivoli Gardens.
We not give up without us. We love him bad.
You hear innocent people getting pulled out of their homes and shot.
This is a horrific massacre.
Police in Kingston searched door to door for Coke.
He's afraid of being taken by the Jamaicans. He knows too much.
Coke simply walked out of Tivoli Gardens surrounded by 300 armed men.
They say, no way, we're not giving up our native son.
Now on Gangsters, the Kingston kingpin, Christopher Dudus Coke. In 2010, with war zones on two fronts, and disasters, both man-made and natural, the U.S. government also made a brutal gangster a global priority.
Dozens of people now dead in Jamaica.
Do not go into the buildings even if you're asked to come in.
It's like a war, like a Mickey.
We can't come out and buy food. We're hungry. Kingston, a scene of desolation and destruction.
American might demanded a manhunt take place in Jamaica.
Christopher Coke, he was maybe the cruelest, most vicious criminal that there was. Witnesses claim that they saw him actually killing people, using a chainsaw to cut somebody in two.
Coke himself had been charged a number of times for various murders, shootings, but no witnesses would ever come forward.
Christopher Michael Coke, known on the streets of Kingston as Dudus, became an international target for U.S. drug enforcement agents. He was indicted for moving large shipments of marijuana and cocaine and weapons between Jamaica and the United States. For 2 decades, Dudus was the don of Jamaica's most feared gang, the Shower Posse.
In Jamaican gang culture, shower posse means that a group of people take out their rivals by showering them with bullets. And that's how they got the name. They would actually go about, shooting up places, shooting wildly into crowds.
The Shower Posse developed this reputation of violence in the United States, even more so than in Jamaica. There are some frightening statistics about how ruthless they were. There was a string of murders from one end of the United States to the other end.
U.S. authorities say Coke and his army of Shower Posse soldiers developed a system for moving literally tons of narcotics into New York and Miami.
The United States had hours and hours of wiretap in which he would discuss his international drug dealings, in great detail.
Coke was well known in the U.S. government level from the very moment that he took over the gang. And in Jamaica, he was the kingpin. Everybody knew him.
The effort to bring down the Shower Posse and bring Christopher Coke to justice caused an international crisis.
They were predicting a bloodbath. They said if the Jamaican authorities try to arrest Christopher Coke, all the boroughs around West Kingston there, all those gangs would get together and defend Christopher Coke.
We not give up with dudus. We love him bad.
U.S. authorities came to realize Dudus was no ordinary gangster. He had deeply rooted connections within the Jamaican government. Some of the most powerful individuals in the country embraced the stronghold he maintained and utilized his influence for their own benefit.
Dudus was the president of Tivoli Gardens. They call him Prezi. Presidential clique.
People were paying tax to him, and he had a kingdom within a kingdom. He clearly had tremendous influence over the government of Jamaica. In fact, he perhaps was the one who was calling the shots.
When the U.S. government put the pressure on Jamaica, the people of Coke's little kingdom, a ghetto known as Tivoli Gardens, braced themselves for a battle.
There was talk that there could be violence in Tivoli Gardens.
It doesn't feel safe in downtown Kingston today, especially not for the police.
All you'd have to do is go down to the community that he was a part of. All you'd have to do is a little bit of homework to know that this is going to be dangerous.
The operations in Tivoli Gardens are being maintained to allow for detailed search for illegal guns and persons who may be wanted by the police for criminal charges.
The Prime Minister went on television to announce that the Minister of Justice will be signing the extradition warrant. This was a signal to the shower posse to do what is necessary to protect Coke.
Jamaican forces moved to take over Tivoli Gardens, May 27, 2010, and the government declared a state of emergency.
That really allowed almost warlike powers within a domestic situation.
Police say they have arrested more than 500 people. The volatile situation is terrorizing residents.
It's 3 days of hell. 73 to 76 people, depending on the body count you listen to, end up dying. Some of them killed, reportedly executed by the police.
The violence sparked an international outcry.
Authorities have denied accusations that several bodies were set on fire.
This was a horrific massacre which took place.
Loyalty for the shower posse's leader was proven through bloodshed. Many Jamaican citizens made the ultimate sacrifice. They gave their own lives in defense of a gangster.
With the area supposedly sealed off, Coke was able to walk out of Tivoli Gardens.
The state of emergency will remain in effect for a period of 1 month, unless the security forces advise that it should be revoked.
Christopher Coke can't be found. Where's he?
Dudus, the Prezi, the kingpin of Kingston, and the target of America, had disappeared. Christopher Michael Coke was one of the most notorious gangsters ever to come out of Jamaica. Feared as well as revered, Dudus, the president of Tivoli Gardens, had two very different constituencies.
He didn't have an elected position, but he was an elder, if you will. He was a well-respected individual, somebody who could be called upon to resolve disputes.
Christopher Coke was essentially a professional criminal and a ruthless businessman who was interested in making a profit and running an organization in a very efficient manner. There was nobody who was close to him, you know. He was clearly in a class by himself.
His nickname, Dudus, belied his hardened criminal image.
comes from the French, mean douce, means sweet. So doudou means sweet, sweet. It's a term of endearment, maybe coming from his family or his mother or something like that. It sounds pretty sweet.
But sweet was not the reputation in Jamaica or the United States. Authorities say he was the mastermind of a violent gang responsible for shipping drugs and weapons into the United States.
One of the most violent drug trafficking consortiums that we've ever had here in the United States.
His own kingdom was barren.
Think of the poorest part of the world or the poorest community you've ever visited, and it's infinitely poorer than that. Jamaica is one of the poorest countries in the world.
1.2 million people, according to the International Monetary Fund, are living below the poverty line.
With poverty, often comes violence.
Criminal gangs, now so entrenched and established, they've almost become a part of our culture, a dysfunctional part of our culture.
Christopher Coke came into power in one of the poorest communities in Jamaica, Tivoli Gardens.
Tivoli Gardens is an inner city housing community, would be probably similar to the projects in America.
You see these low high-rise, old Russian-style buildings, which are kind of blocks of concrete. You know, people hang their clothes all out in the open, and you want to talk to your neighbor, you just poke your head out the window and scream at them.
A lot of people who live in what we call tenement yards, where it's really zinc and cardboard.
Tivoli Gardens is known as a garrison in Kingston.
Garrisons historically were built around housing schemes, the specific geographical locations, political boundaries.
Political parties and their allies would pack poor people into neighborhoods in order to stack the votes.
This is the electoral system of Jamaica. Tivoli Gardens is considered to be the first garrison. The Rastafarians call it Rasta City.
Rasta City and its 5,000 people were aligned with the Jamaica Labour Party.
The Jamaica Labour Party tells its audience that mismanagement of the economy and the lurch towards socialism are the reasons for all their problems, because the majority of those cheering today are unemployed.
It became, by the 90s, a sort of criminal republic that was a no-police zone.
Police did not go in there. They were not policing inside that neighborhood because it was essentially self-policed.
This is the kingdom Christopher Coke inherited, as the first garrison, Tivoli, became home to one of Jamaica's most powerful gangs.
The shower posse. In order to be a good gang, they had to have the source, the drug on your location. The Colombians were powerful because they were growing the coke, processing in their own country where they got it super cheap. What did they have in Jamaica? A lot of ganja, as it was, part of the Rasta culture. The shower posse was primarily bringing in a lot of marijuana, ganja, the real McCoy from the islands.
The shower posse was formed by two men from Kingston, Vivian Blake and Jim Brown.
Jim Brown, not his real name. Lester Coke is his real name. There was a man called Jim Brown, an African-American. He was a football player, and he went on to become a movie star. And he had this reputation for being rough and tough. In Jamaica, going to the movies is such an important pastime, especially in the 60s and 70s with Clint Eastwood and so on. Characters rising through the ghettos and the gangs and so on, emerging, would take on these names.
Lester Coke took the name Jim Brown. He and Vivian Blake built their empire selling marijuana and shared that wealth with the struggling community of Tivoli Gardens.
did something unusual. They gave back to that garrison. They helped create schools. They helped to make sure that people had medical care. They became the Robin Hoods from an early time. As a result, they built up a loyalty in the neighborhood that was remarkable for first-generation gang leaders.
People would protect them and defend them and speak well of them and do whatever it is that they were asked to do.
Under this arrangement, the Shower Posse flourished, both at home and abroad.
Federal agents conduct simultaneous raids in Boston, Miami, Dallas, and 11 other cities. Their targets, Jamaican drug gangs called posses because of their penchant for Wild West-type shootouts.
They really expanded very significantly. They had associate or affiliate in most of the major cities in the US and including in Canada as well, in particular Toronto.
These two guys said, we can bring in the drugs, take the money, and buy weapons to send back to our gangs in Jamaica. And that's what they did. With the toughest American-made guns, they'll be the toughest gang in Jamaica in the world.
Christopher Coke and his older brother, Ja T, were the beneficiaries of their father's malfeasance.
Lester sent them to the best private schools, with the sons and daughters of the Prime Minister of the island, with the wealthiest people who controlled the biggest banks on the island.
Christopher clearly had opportunities. He was clearly smart enough that he could have chosen a legitimate career.
In the end, the young prince of Tivoli Gardens had no choice but to follow in the family business.
Lester gets put into a Kingston jail, and the next thing you know, before he can be extradited, there's an unusual fire and he's burnt to death.
He died under very suspicious circumstances.
On the very same day, in March 1992, that Lester was found dead, his oldest son, Ja T, was put in the ground, the victim of a gunfight.
Jim Brown dying in prison at his son's funeral on the same day, I think. Looks like something out of a movie, doesn't it? Looks like The Godfather.
Everybody in the Shower Posse looks at Christopher Dudus Coke and says, can you take over? His father's dead, but the U.S. doesn't get what it wants. It doesn't get the end of the Shower Posse. It gets, in fact, a bigger gang under Christopher Coke.
In 1992, the young prince of Tivoli Gardens became king. Christopher Coke inherited an established criminal enterprise at the tender age of 23, after his father was found mysteriously burned to death in his Jamaican jail cell.
This was a man who was challenged to take over the Shower Posse and lived up to that challenge.
The Shower Posse had taken hold in one of the poorest garrisons in Jamaica through the sale of marijuana to the rest of the world. But Lester Coke had built up the business. By the time of his death in 1992, U.S. authorities had labeled the Shower Posse a violent gang engaged in murder, gun running, bribery, and mass distribution of cocaine.
In the past 4 years, the FBI has blamed the posses for more than 1,400 deaths.
Christopher Coke took the Shower Posse to a new level.
Coke had apparently good connections with Colombian suppliers who would transship the cocaine to Jamaica, where it would essentially be splintered into smaller shipments.
Jamaica is strategically set up because it's not far from Florida, it's not far from Colombia. You know, Jamaican fishermen can go to Colombia and come back overnight. So Jamaica is an opportunity for your enterprising narco trafficker to get the drugs to Jamaica. That's easy. And then And once you've gotten it to Jamaica, then we'll figure out a way to get it to the United States.
Authorities say the youngest Coke was enterprising, both as a businessman and as a gangster.
If you look in the documents that were filed in court, you will see reports of eyewitnesses who saw him, take a chainsaw and dismember a live human being who had crossed him.
Authorities say he was using Jamaican businesswomen and teenagers to move narcotics undetected into the United States and Canada.
He was using the San Diego track team, which is a prestigious one in Jamaica, as a method of getting drug couriers to come to the United States.
Prosecutors included letters from the mothers of girls who had refused to become drug mules. They were reportedly gang raped and shot.
Just like there are some people that can be naturally talented surgeons and wonderful attorneys and good speakers, there are some people who really can be original gangsters.
Like his father before him, he was a Robin Hood, spreading his wealth to his kingdom in Tivoli Gardens. But the Prezi enjoyed wealth beyond his people's wildest dreams. He lived in a mansion in the hills and drove a Range Rover.
He basically ruled almost like a monarch.